20 Days to Save the USA is on now with Karen Smith. Karen Smith is an immigrant from South Africa living in Texas who has been a voice for white South Africans suffering from vicious oppression by racist blacks in that country. Karen was educated in South Africa, Namibia, and Zimbabwe, studied nursing in Pietermaritzburg. Karen's stunned to see people cross into the border illegally to get into America, while her people, white South Africans, are turned away at the U.S. Embassy where they want to legally immigrate to our country. Her website is radiofreesouthafrica.com. Her YouTube channel has been Radio Free South Africa. And we wanted to talk to her today about what it means to live in a country that has defined a distinct racial group as lacking in full legal standing. In this case, the white South Africans who have been vilified and persecuted and murdered in their own country, despite being there for hundreds of years and fully deserving the title of Africans. Karen, I'm glad you were able to come to be with us in 20 Days to Save the USA. How are you today?
I'm great, thank you, Bill, and thank you for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. Wanted to know if you could inform us about the reality of being in a country that has basically vilified and categorized white people as worthy only of contempt. Tell us about it.
Well, Bill, it goes back a very, very long way. When the whites first landed in South Africa, there were no blacks in the Western Cape where they landed, none whatsoever. There were only the Bushmen, also known as the Khoisan, and they were the only blacks there. It was only 150 years after they landed at the Cape that they came across the first blacks who were coming from the north looking for fresh grazing and other tribes to conquer and take as slaves and take their cattle. 150 years after the whites first arrived at the Cape. So one has to understand that to understand anything about South Africa. Anyway, there were many wars with the blacks, and we, the same as the Americans, we fought the British and won. And eventually South Africa became South Africa, and it was ruled by the Afrikaners, who were the Cape Dutch originally. But after 40 years or so of white rule, the world decided that we were pariahs because we had a form of segregation, the same as America had, where each black tribe, and there are more than 11 of them, each black tribe was given their own homeland where they lived. The white taxpayer paid for their housing, their water, their lights, their electricity, their airports, their schools, their hospitals, everything. But they each had their own land, their own little country where they were ruled by their own chiefs, by their own rules, and the whites had their place too. But because there never were enough whites in South Africa to run the mines and whatever, these people were allowed to come in as laborers. And the world said that we were terrible people with awful laws and we were killing them in their thousands, which was not true. And we must hand the country over to the African population. Now, at the moment, there are approximately 3 million whites in South Africa and more than 70 million total population. So you can understand that we are a tiny, tiny minority. And yet, when St. Nelson Mandela became president and took over the country with his African National Congress, who are communists, they passed more anti-white laws than ever were anti-black laws in South Africa under white rule. There are over 117 laws totally against white people, denying us access to work, denying us access to pension funds with the government, denying us to social security, not allowing us any part in government, etc., etc. And yet, under the ANC, every single thing that they do wrong, or every fraud they commit or every billions that they steal from the taxpayers, they blame on white supremacy. So we were then total outcasts. And of the 3 million whites living in South Africa, 1 million of them are living in informal settlements, squatter camps, basically, where they build houses from cardboard boxes or street signs or whatever they can find, because they do not have access to social security. And now that COVID has hit, it's even worse, because the government has quite openly stated that whites will not get any assistance, COVID assistance, although it's pouring in by the hundreds of millions from the rest of the world to help South Africa. The government refuses to help whites. Now, I work very closely with a charity that feeds houses and clothes and gets hospital bills paid, etc., for whites who live in these camps. Now, we are not allowed to take them food. If you take food to them, you have to have a government certificate certifying that it's been bought and that it's good and all those kind of things. So even feeding them is becoming a challenge at this moment in time. It is terrible to live under a communist socialist regime because you have no rights. And on top of all of that, whites are being murdered by the thousands. We estimate that 80,000 whites have been brutally, and I mean brutally, Bill, this is not drive-by shootings as we have in Chicago here. These are people who wait in your home for you to come home, and they will hold you captive for days on end. They drown the children in boiling water. They pour boiling oil on you. They burn you with soldering irons. They drill holes in your legs with electric drills. They cut the husband's eyelids off so they can't not watch while they torture his family. They rape the mother and daughters with sharpened broomsticks and broken bottles. And when they are done, they may leave the husband alive because they know that he is going to commit suicide because he failed his family. He failed in what his primary duty is protecting his family. So the things that they're doing to whites are incredibly bad. But on top of all of that, they are now changing the constitution so that they can take your property, not just your farm, not just your commercial property, your home, your furniture, your car, everything you own. They can take it without compensation and give it to some black buddy of theirs. So living under a regime like that is a death sentence mostly for whites. And I believe that if we vote in Joe Biden, that is going to be what happens in this country, because there is already such huge division between whites and blacks, between Christians and Islamic, between Democrats and Republicans. They have divided this country so much on so many lines that I don't believe that there's any peaceable solution, because if Trump wins, the Antifa and BLM are going to go crazier than they already have. And of course, all these illegals, call them what they really are, the illegals that are pouring over the borders and changing the voting constituency of many, many states are in the Democrats' favor. So what is happening here is what I've been trying to tell Americans for the last 9 years, is South Africa is the blueprint for what is designed to happen to the rest of the world. They tried it on a small scale in South Africa to see what the reaction would be. And when the whites in South Africa did not stand up and fight, and when the rest of the world turned a blind eye to it, they rolled it out in Europe, only much quicker. So you saw the blacks pouring into Europe, which is no longer white. I mean, you're told in Europe today that you must just accept this because you're not a European. There is no such thing. It's a new world with no borders, etc., etc. And then they did the same thing here with these caravans of thousands of them coming in, and nobody wanted to stop them except President Trump. The Democrats didn't want to do anything about it. And now we have Antifa, which is, and Black Lives Matter, which is very much like the economic freedom fighters in South Africa, a group led by a young firebrand called Julius Malema, who hate whites with an absolute passion, stoke up the black population against them at every opportunity, and call for the murder of whites. They sing in Parliament a song called Kill the Boer, and Boer is essentially a farmer, but it's come to mean white people. So the government is prodding this lot along.
Right, and so you've seen, your family there. They pass word to you on what's happening. It must be absolutely terrifying. And this is the same thing that you can expect. First, they talk about it, then they do the deeds. They commit acts of.
And you know what the problem is, Bill? They talk about it, and people can't believe it, because after many of my shows, I get emails saying, this can't be happening. You must be exaggerating. Your president says it's not happening, etc., etc. Because people cannot wrap their minds around the brutality of these people. And you're seeing it here with Black Lives Matter. They're doing that, the knockout game.
Yeah, knockout game, sure.
There you go. People, you can tell people about it, but they do not believe it until it happens to them, because it is too much for a civilized mind to accept that barbarity like that can exist in first world countries. So until it happens to you or to somebody close to you, you just turn a blind eye to it. And also, with the international press on the side of these villains, they make it out that it's not happening. It's only the right wing that are causing this. Now, in South Africa, it's the colonials, the small population of whites that are causing it. Here, it's the right wing extremists that are to blame for everything. But it's the same thing. They don't like you because you're white. Guys if they eventually get caught for anything, about 1% of housebreaking, murdering perpetrators finally get to court. And the one lot said, well, I killed them because they were white. And they got off. They got off. And another.
You're referring to a case of a murder case?
In South Africa, where these blacks, 6 of them invaded a home and killed the whole family. When they eventually got to court, they just said, well, we killed them because they were white. And there was a good enough reason, so it was okay. And I see the same sort of things happening here right now that are happening in South Africa. These guys get arrested, taken to court, and they get let out without bail because some Democratic judge decided that that's a good idea. And I'm terrified. I've gone through these things 3 times in my lifetime. I'm 67 next week. And
right.
I'm going
so
to go.
Basically, Black Lives Matter is a mask. It's a mask
Yes.
for we hate whites.
Absolutely, that's what it is. And I'm afraid that there's no way around it. They've said so. They are Marxists and they hate whites. And that's the way it's going to be. And I'm afraid, I am terrified for my grandchildren, because I lived through it. I lived through the civil war in Rhodesia. I lived through the takeover in Namibia. I lived through the riots and the same that was going on here now, riots and burning and destruction. I lived through that. And I'm going to live through it again in another country. And my fear, Bill, is that America is that city on a hill, that bright light, that hope for the world. And if it goes, the whole world goes with it. And that is my fear.
The point is, of course, is that either we fight now or it's over. And hopefully, if Donald Trump is elected again, hopefully he can hear your message. And he can do something to help the white South Africans who are being decimated. If this is not a genocide, please tell me what is.
Well, they call it what? Racial cleansing. But it is a genocide. It really is a genocide. And I have feared for some years, and I have reason now to fear even more, that one morning we are going to wake up and ask, where are all the white South Africans? Because they will just be slaughtered. And COVID around the world is a huge excuse for those who should not be in power to seize even more power and make rules that are not constitutional, are not laws, but are being enforced. And they're doing that even harder in South Africa than the rest of the world. They were in a total lockdown. You were allowed to leave your house for an hour in the morning to exercise. And if you were not exercising, you would be put in jail, if you were outside and not exercising. So I'm afraid that the possibility does exist that overnight the whites of South Africa will disappear.
Right. Well, we have to, there's only one thing you can say, and that is that we have to fight, we have to pray, we have to sacrifice, and we have to do everything we can for Donald Trump to win this election.
Yes.
Well, Karen Ann Smith, listen, thank you so much for being on 20 Days to Save the USA. Godspeed to you, and Godspeed to South Africa, and Godspeed to the persecuted whites of South Africa. Thank you so much for being